With every landmark cinematic achievement, it's common to hear that you can thank it for inspiring more productions like it. For instance, you can thank The Wizard of Oz for setting the standard for live-action fantasy movies. You can thank Star Wars: A New Hope for making sci-fi more accessible to the mainstream. And you can thank the Blair Witch Project for its innovative marketing campaign, forever changing how horror is advertised. The same sentiment has been applied to animated movies as well, mostly those done by Walt Disney Animation Studios. But there's one the company merely distributed that's had an unmistakable impact on nearly every animated movie you've seen in the past 25 years, and that's Pixar Animation Studios' Toy Story. Up until recently, this was considered a nearly flawless film series, but it seems that the more saturated it gets, the more Toy Story projects come out and the more films it inspires, the dimmer its light shines. A classic case of quantity over quality, even if the quantity is still quality. People used to get excited when a new Toy Story thing was announced, but now it's all pleading Disney and Pixar to leave good enough alone. What's changed? If the Toy Story franchise is so good, why is there a pushback to getting more of it? That's one question I hope to answer by the end of this video series, so stick around. But before then, I'll just say this'll be a look into every theatrically released Toy Story movie as of 2019. I won't be covering the TV specials, miniseries, or offshoots, but I revisited the 2000 spin-off Buzz Lightyear of Star Command last year if you want to check that out. I've been familiar with Toy Story my entire life, the early movies and merchandise especially. I'm one of those people who's very adamant that it should have ended with Toy Story 3, not out of fatigue, but from a place of love and concern for its future perception. I love these movies so much that I can recite the history behind the first one by heart. The background of Toy Story is intrinsically tied to the background of computer graphics. You could go as far back as the 1950s, but the story doesn't ramp up until the late 70s and early 80s. More computer-based divisions were opening up at places like Lucasfilm, and filmmakers were incorporating more computer-generated imagery into their projects to varying extents. One Disney animator who got really excited about the future of the technology was John Lasseter, who, after getting a screening of Tron, pitched a computer-animated project to his bosses in 1983. But fearing the cost and perceived artificiality of computerized animation compared to hand-drawn animation, they quickly fired Lasseter, so he settled for a job at Lucasfilm's computer division. This isn't the last time John Lasseter will be let go from Disney, sorry to spoil a brilliant callback. But with an experienced animator, Lucasfilm's computer graphics demos quickly got more elaborate, so much so that, with some assistance from Ed Catmull and Steve Jobs, John would go on to found an entirely new animation studio, Pixar, in 1986. Despite their talent growing and their shorts garnering media attention and accolades, the studio struggled to make ends meet. Selling their computers as top-of-the-line hardware didn't work, so they spent a few years animating commercials instead of investing in their dream job of creating the world's first computer-animated movie. That is until 1991, when Disney came a-callin' back, offering to finance a TV special that would serve as a sequel to Pixar's award-winning short Tin Toy, before deciding to up the scope and make it a movie about an entirely new set of toys. Pixar was allotted $30 million, 4 years, and a lot of executive interference at first. Anyone with a basic knowledge of Pixar's history probably knows about the Black Friday reel by now. Jeffrey Katzenberg would review Toy Story's progress and constantly request for it to be edgier, to the point that by the time the first story reel was ready to show Disney in November 1993, every character was a cold-hearted jerk with no redeeming qualities. I'm willing to believe this was Katzenberg enacting sabotage, trying to get the movie cancelled by Disney higher-ups so they'd have one less potential competitor in animation. But a more rational mind may assume that he was trying to find a way to make Pixar's storytelling conventions distinct from Disney, so people wouldn't mistake it for a Disney production. Nevertheless, the Pixar team was given another chance, and a couple months later, they came back with the exact same story, but with a more comedic, optimistic, and family-friendly atmosphere, which was approved. This period in production has always been a wonderful story in and of itself to me. This idea that any story concept, no matter how good, could be muddied by executive interference, or how even the most hopeless story concept can be put back on track with the right motivation. It's the most discussed aspect of Toy Story's production, but there's also how getting Tom Hanks and Tim Allen to play the leads further enforced how they interacted. There's also Joss Whedon's involvement in the script, so, well, that just happened. And the obvious, that they made the movie about toys because computer animation was best at rendering plastic at the time. And teapots. Lots and lots of teapots. Toy Story finally premiered at El Capitan Theatre on November 19th, 1995, before its wide release on November 22nd, 1995, a day that film historians look back on with utmost reverence, as National Don Rickles Day. Beyond that, the movie got rave reviews and made a lot of money through the box office and the predictably large merchandise campaign. It's a movie about toys. Obviously they were going to make a bunch of toys, a silver buzz here and there that could become an alluring collector's item over time. This was Pixar's very first film, and it set high expectations for not just their future catalog, but the future of computer technology. 1995 was already a big year for tech, with the launch of Windows 95 and the 5th generation of gaming reaching the West. But the release of Toy Story was a great way to close out this transformative year. Prove that a movie entirely processed with computers could still have the human element, a story that could make audiences of all ages and backgrounds laugh, cry, think, and learn.
And there seems to be no sign of intelligent life anywhere.
Hello? Oh, yeah! Ah! Whoa! Hey, whoa!
There's a kid called Andy who has a bunch of toys that he plays with every day, his favorite being Sheriff Woody, a pull-string cowboy who, when no humans are around, is the respected leader of Andy's room. But their owner's birthday party is suddenly moved forward by a week, and he even more suddenly gets the hot new toy sensation, Buzz Lightyear, who, despite having no idea that he's a toy, throws Woody for a loop by winning over his friends and becoming Andy's prized possession for a while. But through toy life-threatening shenanigans, Woody and Buzz eventually put their differences aside and become best friends. If you've somehow never seen Toy Story before, I hope I did a good job explaining what it's about. Toys, ownership, leadership, friendship, throw in Battleship while you're at it. It was once thought the world from a toy's perspective is only something you picture while playing with one, but Pixar did a great job of anthropomorphizing a whole bedrooms full, giving them understandable hopes, fears, and dangers. These days, many will opine that the what if inanimate object had feelings concept has been played out, making Toy Story appear like a trendsetter in that regard. But the thing is, animation has always been doing this. Pixar's early shorts were all about this, but what Toy Story did with this broad concept was make it cinematic, and it did so with great characters. The protagonist, Woody, is given a lot to learn. While settled into a highly respected status that he's very comfortable with, he shows a lot of envy and distress when that status is taken away from him. It demonstrates how bad luck can harm someone's moral compass and eventually credibility. But despite this, Woody remains super likable throughout the film. First as a figurehead, then a semi-anti-hero, before becoming a true hero. It's an easy arc to follow. Tom Hanks' performance also gets this across immaculately. This is the best performance of his whole career. That might be jumping the gun a bit, but think of all the emotions Woody goes through in just this movie, and the character development he goes through. Tom's range as both a comedic and dramatic actor is on full display here. Buzz Lightyear is also fun to watch, but for different reasons. Tim Allen was at the height of his popularity when this movie released, so getting him to play this naive rookie in over his head is quite ironic. Buzz is designed to play into a lot of old-school spaceman cliches, and his persistent belief that he really is on a mission to stop a galactic threat helps flesh out his, at the time, completely fictitious brand. His arc is all about eventually getting snapped out of character and figuring out who he is if he isn't Buzz Lightyear. Still Buzz Lightyear, still a boundless action hero, but there's a character study broad enough that you could see it as an allegory for any personal crisis. Andy's other toys don't have as much to do since they spend most of the movie in Andy's room observing action instead of partaking in it, but they're still mostly memorable. Rex is a hilarious subversion of the cool, epic dinosaur toy. He's incredibly neurotic, gasping in terror at the smallest things, and while never one of my very favourite characters, I think he helps in adding more personality to the room. Ham is the piggy bank, the first of many John Ratzenberger roles in Pixar's catalogue, but still one of the best. He's a bit of a wisecracker, the idea being that since he lives on the windowsill, he has the most knowledge of the outside world. so his voice is useful for what they give him. Slinky Dog and Bo Peep share the same role of being some of Woody's biggest supporters. Slinky Dog because he's a good boy and without a doubt my favourite, and Bo Peep because she's sort of Woody's girlfriend. Sort of because as of now, she doesn't have much personality beyond that and being nice. Mr. Potato Head is one of the more divisive characters in this movie, and indeed, I find him to be uneven as a whole. He's a hoot and a holler in the first act, but when the plot swerve happens and Woody is framed, his change to being Woody's biggest defamer is always jarring. Regardless, he's got some excellent material, so silver lining. The Bucket of Army Men have one shining moment at the start of the movie, but are quickly put out of commission. I still think their spotlight scene is quite enjoyable. The more war movies you see, and the more early Ermy you watch, the more their little tribute role may tickle your fancy. Lastly, for the main toys, there's the other little green men, the alien mascots of the Pizza Planet restaurant, and feckless cultists of the Claw. They also get one classic scene, then lose ground in the story, but there's nothing wrong with how offbeat and weird their scene is. Those are just the main ones, but Andy has a spoiled rich kid's worth of toys that made every viewer jealous. You've got Lenny, you've got RC, but you've also got some background fodder that never left much of an impression and was slowly phased out of the series. I can't be too disappointed with the snubbing of bowling alley screen-looking Rocky from the lineup. Speaking of action figures, take a look at this one. It's a takeoff of Blanca from Street Fighter 2. Also notice the similarities to other Street Fighter characters on the package design. Aha! We caught these guys ripping off Capcom. Anyway, let's get back to Toy Story. With such a massive closet of toys, Andy must be a pretty interesting kid, right? Nope, total blank slate. But that isn't a bad thing. Any kid could see themselves as Andy, so much so that most of the kids at Andy's birthday party are just clones of him. If there was ever a horror movie based around early CGI, this should be one of the plot points. Andy's family is also quite small in one note, a baby sister Molly, and a mother with a sense of humour. Since they're less of a focus in the story than even Andy, this isn't a problem. They're world building if nothing else. We have Sid, an older kid who takes his aggression out on toys, turning them into Frankenstein's monsters. Sid has way more personality than Andy, because he's the closest thing this movie has to a villain, and even then, his biggest crime is buying a firework. Okay, that actually is a crime depending on the context. The point is, Sid is not growing up in the right environment. His sister Hannah shares nothing in common with him, his father seems quite reclusive, his dog Scud is a naughty boy, and his mother's shilling Pop-Tarts. With such a creative mind and penchant for genetic engineering, he deserved a better childhood. Despite Woody and Buzz's arc taking up most of the focus, the cast in Toy Story is overall solid. It's a colourful and mostly memorable cast, and the characters with supporting roles do their job in supporting the story well.
Will Andy pick me? Don't count on it! Aww.
The Toy Story movies, at their core, are about being wanted. That's the theme present across the whole film series in many forms. Since the toys are owned by kids, they see their goal in life as to get played with by them, taking part in their made-up adventures. In Andy's room, that's achievable for everyone at first before he fixates on Buzz. But in Sid's room, life is suffering. All of Sid's toys are terrified of getting mutilated by him and work together to repair themselves. They don't get what they want until the end, a bit of empathy from their owner. You can see a bit of Freak's inspiration in Sid's toys, driving home that just because they're unusual doesn't mean they're lesser beings than their peers. It was quite smart of the writers to find a way to get this message across, framed through toys and the sorts of kids that play with them. This isn't just a movie starring toys, it's a movie that embraces that it's about toys. This element serves so many jokes and narrative functions that it's hard to imagine it working with just humans or just animals. There's a lot of broad and timeless humor they wrung out of the designs and functions of the toys. Woody knocking Slinky off the bed and it taking a while for him to completely drop, the squeaky sound when Buzz is hit in the face, Woody's pull string drawing attention when it gets caught on a railing. A lot of consideration was placed into how to make the best and funniest out of their unique concept. It also translates well into plot beats, how certain features of Buzz are worked into the story, like the reflectivity of his helmet and world-famous karate chop action. The whole reason the movie's about toys is because plastic objects were the easiest to translate into CGI in its infancy, but they stayed ambitious, playing around with shadows, lights, and other effects. important enough to the story that you never mistake it for an 80-minute tech demo. Oh yeah, this movie's pretty short. We're so used to 2 to 3 hour movies these days that I thought the runtime was worth mentioning. Whether you think it makes the movie better or worse, it makes the most with that runtime. Well-defined character arcs and a lot of colourful locations explored. That's one of the most interesting things to look back on Toy Story for. The world feels quite different to in its sequels. A few more magical moments back here, like one of the army men having a glowing cross on their helmet, the toys scaring Sid being the only time in the franchise they choose to even move in front of the humans, and the ending where Buzz can inexplicably fly just for the scene. This is something I can't see any other Toy Story movie doing, even with the premise of living toys being inherently magical. The world's way smaller here too, with only a couple main sets. But when you get small glimpses into the world beyond the adventure, they keep you immersed. Like the newbie Pizza Planet driver asking for directions back to the restaurant, and the TV room in Sid's house showing so much of his dad's personality without giving him a single spoken line. The shining jewel of this is the pan across the Pizza Planet play area. From Woody and Buzz's perspective, it looks suitably alien. But if you watched this movie as a kid, you immediately wanted to go to Pizza Planet. Alas, in my zone, all we had was chipmunks. Look at this guy, you couldn't trust him on a space mission. The more fanciful and uncertain tone debatably makes this the creepiest movie in the series. Now, Toy Story still has its creepy moments after this, no arguments there, but between the primitive CGI, quite intense score if you listen to it on its own, and the gauntlet that is Sid's room, I could see this one being quite unsettling to younger viewers these days. Me, nothing about the movie creeps me out anymore. I've had it in my life too long, but I guess the behind the scenes material on the DVD is quite uncanny. If you thought it looked off before, maybe stay out of disc 2. It just reminds me of how much of a marvel this film's animation is in perspective. John Lasseter was an experienced character animator, and that really comes out in the movie's approach to that field. All the characters have designs that easily capture their identities, with movement to boot. The animation on Woody is especially good. Just like how Tom Hanks is able to display this wide emotional range, so do the animators. It almost breaks the model sometimes, but every face is a treat. The reason they look so good for the time is that the crew made sculptures of the characters and then digitally scanned them into the computer, so they have basis in reality. This movie also created new jobs within the animation industry. For example, imperfection artists to scratch surfaces up so they don't look synthetic. On the flip side, this movie's pushing 30. It doesn't look as good as it once did. You can sense that the chase scene for the van was one of the last things they animated, because the set isn't very dense all the time. A clipping error here or there, the humans and Scud have not stood the test of time, they've got concept art of themselves hanging on the walls instead of photos, and the second you're told that they sometimes blink out of sync to save computer power, it affects your perception of so many otherwise great moments. But I think the ingenuity of this movie, how willing they were to show this story about toys to the best of their ability with untested smoke and mirrors, makes up for the rough edges. Of course it's dated, because a lot of our modern CGI creature comforts hadn't even been created yet, but I wouldn't have it any other way. If Pixar announced they'd be remastering Toy Story with their current computer power, I'd be mad. It might look better, but the story and characters are why people watch the movie, not because it still looks cutting edge, not even because it's the first of its kind, but because it's got great scenes like these ones. The Toys staff meeting sets up their society really well in a lot of different areas. What their usual concerns are, how they'd react to a crisis, and the loudest voices in the crowd. It's interesting to know that scenes like this were never in the Black Friday treatment, showing how some of the worst aspects of that version are the best aspects of the finished movie. Buzz's first flight is a charming little spectacle, Buzz gets to do some action, Woody gets to be dumbfounded, and the camera operator gets to be creative. They try to keep the cinematography realistic in this movie to differentiate themselves from the sweeping tracking shots of some early CGI demos, and this is a good example of them buckling down and wanting to make an authentic movie. Woody and Buzz's fight is always an epic moment. The physical battle has hit after hit in the comedy department, and then their argument after being left behind at the gas station is flawlessly executed, and hilariously one-sided. As I've been over before, Pizza Planet is an engrossing portrait of 90s play areas. The lighting is wondrous, especially when they're sneaking between the arcade machines. On the subject of 90s overload, the Buzz Lightyear commercial, narrated by Penn Jillette, is my favorite part of the movie. It's effective enough to snap Buzz out of his delusion, and I'm just a sucker for extreme 90s commercials. They're so gaudy, they're great. And the epilogue is a great place to end the events for now. Andy's family celebrating Christmas, bookending the story by depicting the toys getting prepared for another wave of presents, but with way less worry in the air than before. Picking least favorite scenes in Toy Story is hard because it's such a short movie and there's nothing I want to skip, so my apologies in advance. The first half of the chase scene is quite ridiculous. How Woody doesn't even attempt to explain why he's knocked RC out of the car, how Scud chases him and Buzz into traffic, how spinning the remote around somehow spins RC around. I guess it's all farcical enough to be comedy, and the rest of the chase is quite good, but it's another reminder that realism wasn't the first Toy Story's top priority. Despite a few gripes, I still think this is a great movie, and always worth revisiting. It's short and to the point, and thrives in the field of animation. It did really well at the time, and a sequel was guaranteed when John saw a kid with a Woody toy at the airport that Christmas.
An amazing three-dimensional adventure.
Buzz Lightyear to the rescue!